Judas and the Black Messiah is the directorial debut of Shaka King and stars Daniel Kaluuya as Fred Hampton and Lakeith Stanfield as William O'Neill. And this is the story of Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, and his eventual betrayal by FBI informant William O'Neill. I'll be totally honest, I didn't really know that much about this story going into this film. They definitely don't teach a lot about Fred Hampton or the Black Panther Party in the public school system in the United States. So I had heard a little bit about Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party, but I still didn't really know that much about it. So that's part of why I was really glad this movie was made, because you get to see a lot of the history of this movement. And rather than just focusing on the figures of Fred Hampton and William O'Neill, they show you a lot of how the Black Panther Party functioned in their communities, how they had a lot of programs that helped a lot of people in their areas, specifically how they gave a lot of underprivileged people access to healthcare and free lunch programs for kids who didn't have access. You also get to see the Black Panthers' relationships with other groups fighting for the same causes, how some would join them and form a coalition with them, or how others didn't really agree with their methods or approve of them, so they were kind of rivaling them. So the movie does a really good job at giving you context for what was going on in this time period and what was surrounding Fred Hampton and William O'Neill. And I really appreciated that because we don't get a lot of movies about this subject. We get a lot of movies about racial injustice, especially last year. I feel like we had a lot of them, and for good reason. But Hollywood hasn't really done much with the Black Panther Party or Fred Hampton. So it was great to see that story get the cinematic portrayal that it really deserves. And honestly, I feel like this movie was kind of educational because I didn't really know that much about the story going into it, but I walked away from it feeling like I really got an authentic portrayal of this time period and of that group. Daniel Kaluuya is absolutely amazing as Fred Hampton. I would not be surprised at all if he got an Oscar nomination for this performance because he just freaking killed it here. I don't really know how to explain it other than the fact that when I was watching this movie, I did not see Daniel Kaluuya. Everything I knew about this guy just disappeared into Fred Hampton. And he has to do a lot of different stuff in the movie. There's scenes where he's giving these really passionate speeches to these big crowds, but then there's also some scenes where he has to pull off some dramatic acting, and he dials it back considerably. And I thought he handled all that stuff really well. Ever since Get Out, this guy's become one of the best new actors of this generation. But the movie's not actually from Fred Hampton's point of view. It takes place in the perspective of William O'Neill, the guy who eventually outs him to the FBI, resulting in his murder. I don't really consider that a spoiler because this story happened over 50 years ago, so if you didn't want to know that going in, I'm sorry, but I feel like I can talk about it since it's based on true historical fact. Anyway, I thought Lakeith Stanfield did a really good job as William O'Neill. He's caught in this really tough position where he's recruited by the FBI early on to essentially be an informant for them, for the Black Panther Party and Fred Hampton, in order to get him out of having to go to jail for something that he does early on in the film. So he goes undercover and pretends to be an ally of the Black Panther movement, but as time goes on, he begins to care about Fred and his cause, even though he knows what he's eventually going to have to do. So there's a lot of conflict brewing inside of him throughout the course of the movie, and I thought Lakeith Stanfield portrayed it all really well. There's also a couple other really great performances in this movie that I think are going to be overlooked just because of how great Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield are. First of which is Jesse Plemons, who I feel like is really underrated. It seems like he's showing up in everything lately, but he's the guy who recruits William O'Neill as the FBI informant, and he does a really good job here. He's very quiet and subdued, but he still has this really menacing attitude. Dominique Fishback plays Fred Hampton's girlfriend, and while I didn't necessarily feel their love and that romantic connection and thought that that could have been fleshed out a little bit more, I did think she pulled off some incredible dramatic acting. There's a horrific scene that occurs in the third act that is just a close-up on her face and something's going on in the background. And it's just mind-blowing what she's able to do just through her facial expression. That scene in particular I feel like has just been etched into my mind because of how powerful it is. So she was really great in the film. This is a story that I feel like is very moving and important, and I'm glad that it was told with this film. I think Shaka King did a really good job with the direction. He made some really interesting choices with it. For example, it's a very quiet film for the most part, and a lot of it is just two characters in a room having a conversation, which I didn't really expect. I thought it was going to be a lot more intense than that. There's some intense sequences for sure, including a shootout that occurs in the middle of the movie that I thought was really well handled. But for the most part, a lot of the film is just people talking and organizing. And in that way, the movie gives you a good insight into what these people were thinking and feeling at the time. I have one real issue with this movie, and that is that for a while, it feels a bit like a routine film about this subject, and pretty much for the entire first half or so, I was feeling that there wasn't a lot that was setting it apart from other films about racial justice. It's certainly well made, and it's elevated by some really good performances and direction, but there just wasn't a lot in that first half that made the film stand out, in my opinion. Once you get into the second half, and William O'Neill gets deeper into his job with the FBI, but also in his relationship with Hampton, it can be really investing. But I still just would have liked for that first half to have a little bit more personality, just so the movie could have stood out a bit more. I feel like if it was directed by someone with a little bit more experience as a filmmaker, it could have been a little more solid than it was, but considering that this is Shaka King's first film as a director, he did a pretty damn good job with what he was given. But as a whole, I really enjoyed Judas and the Black Messiah. I thought it had terrific performances from Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield, as well as some of the secondary characters. It took a story that I didn't know that much about, but I walked away from it feeling like I learned a lot, not only about these two historical figures, but also about the time period. And the last 15 minutes of this movie are extremely powerful. It says a lot about the era that this film took place in, but also about today. So I do think this is a really important story that everybody should see. I'm gonna give Judas and the Black Messiah a 7 out of 10. I do recommend seeing this film if you're able to, if you want to check it out in a theater. It is playing in theaters right now, but if you have your concerns over that experience, then you can watch it at home on HBO Max. However you check it out, it is worth seeing, and I do hope you'll enjoy it. But guys, thank you so much for watching this review. I really do appreciate it. What are your thoughts on Judas and the Black Messiah? Let me know down in the comments below. Look forward to more videos very soon, including this weekend when I upload my best movies of 2020 video. I know I'm really late with that one, probably the last person to get out that video on YouTube, but there were a lot of great films last year that I do really want to talk about on this channel. I've caught up on a lot of stuff recently, and I feel like by now I've finally seen everything that I feel like I should see before I make that video. So you can look forward to that. I'm really excited to put that out. And as always, be sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you next time.